Good afternoon. I'm standing out here in the middle of a regular production field, not an answer plot, and I'm thinking about the season up to this point. And I'm also thinking about what are we going to be doing in the next few days. And one thing comes to mind for sure, and that's we're going to be spraying our post herbicide if it hasn't already happened. And I want to think about, we're a little late. We've had a lot of wet weather, which has kept us out of the field. How has that affected our young developing corn plant? So we're going to look at some things today. We're going to look at how weed pressure can affect a corn plant, how it grows and develops. So as we walk along here and we look at this corn, you can notice that it's pretty clean. Our burn downs lasted pretty good. Corn it looks good. You'll notice, you look at this plant right here, you notice how this plant is really growing. Its leaves are oriented perpendicular to the row. Okay, it's roughly V5 growth stage. We'll look at that here in just a minute. Everything looks good. Everything's tip-top shape. We got some pretty good uniformity. But here in a minute, we're going to go to where we didn't get the greatest weed control up front, and we're going to see how those weeds have affected that corn. So here we see some things completely different than what we were just looking at. Here, we're on the field edge, keep that in mind, but we did not get very good control. Maybe it was a skip from our sprayer from the fungicide. Maybe we didn't hold the boom over far enough. Either way, we've got weed pressure, okay? And we look, and we get on top of this corn, and we really look, and we see this corn has changed. It's changed the way it's growing and developed. Now this is still, we'll dig it up and show you here in just a minute, it's still V5 corn, but you look at how the leaves are oriented, and now instead of growing perpendicular to the row, the leaves are growing parallel with the row. Reason is because all the weeds around it, until we sprayed it, were competing with that young corn plant for sunlight. And when it competes with that corn plant for sunlight, it turns itself so that it can capture that, and it goes parallel with the row. Now all of a sudden, this plant has become competition with this plant, where we move over here right beside it, and these plants don't have the competition, so they're able to grow, and they're not competing with each other near as much as these plants over here. Something else you'll notice about this corn, especially with the competition from the weeds around it, is its color. Now this farm has had roughly 100 units of nitrogen put out in the form of anhydrous a week before planting, which was right at a month ago. Here we are, we're at V5 corn. This corn over here, which does not have the weed competition, you can see, man, it's got a really dark green color. It's hit the nitrogen, it's growing well. And this over here, even though these weeds are dead now, the damage is done, right? We robbed this young corn plant of some much needed nutrition on the front side. It came out of getting its groceries from the seed to getting its groceries from the soil, and it had so much competition around it from this ryegrass and fescue and these other weeds that it wasn't able to get that nitrogen because they had it. Okay, now this ultimately will affect our yield. Last thing on how weed competition affects how this corn plant grows and develops. So we have these two plants. On my left, or on your left, is the plant that I showed you a while ago that was in amongst all the weed competition. And on the right is where we got our burn down, we got the chemical sprayed. We weren't just reliant on post herbicides, and we got there timely enough that we kept everything weed free around this young growing corn plant. Now you look at it and you think, oh hey, I want the one on the left. It's bigger, but that's not necessarily better. It's bigger because it had to compete. It's bigger because it had to stretch its legs. Both these corn plants are V5 corn plants, okay? Now, another thing that trying to plant into those conditions where we didn't get a good burn down on the front side, where we have weed competition, is that's a little bit tighter, and it's a little bit harder to get our planter in the ground. And as you'll notice here, as we zoom in, it might be very hard to see on the camera, but our seed scar is actually right there at the tip of my finger. Now if you look where that is at, that is roughly a ½ inch deep. Now we go over here and we look at our other plant that was planted where things were clean. We'll see that our seed placement is right at 1 inch, maybe just a little bit deeper than 1 inch. So much better. You say, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters a lot in how this corn plant grows and develops. And I'm not satisfied with the inch. I'd rather see 1.5 inches to 2. But in this situation, and we'll look at this multiple times throughout the year, it's hard to see right now, but I can already start to see some differences on how this has affected this young corn plant and how it's grown and developed. You see that my root systems, they're about the same. for both. Not a lot of differences in the size of these root systems, but you'll notice this one on the right that was a little deeper, that allowed that corn plant to develop the way it wants to. You'll notice that I have a lot more secondary roots, feeder roots, the roots that actually bring most of the water and most of the nutrition to the plant. I have more of those here than I do here, and that is a direct result to how this corn plant started.